Now we're in the glorious middle school years. Middle school. Don't we all just hate it? To be fair, middle school is already hard because you're going through puberty, then you add being trans on top of that, and now add being bullied by about 85% of the student body on top of that, and you end up with the anxious mess that was me. Yeah, middle school was terrible and sucked. I'm definitely not happy with how I acted back then, and who I am now is very different from who I was then, though I'm still very much trans now, as I'd been then. Part of me wishes that I'd come out as trans in middle school, and maybe things would have gone differently. Maybe I would have been able to be more comfortable in my body if I could present more masculine. But then again, maybe the bullying would have gotten worse. I wasn't bullied for being trans. I think people picked up on the fact that I'm autistic and bullied me for that, which caused me to shut down and go mute on people. I hardly spoke to anyone. I would speak to teachers since I always looked up to them and saw them as friends, but when it came to students, I only spoke to a handful of the girls because the girls were nicer to me. I never spoke to any boys since they tended to bully me more than the girls. Now, as I was only hanging out with girls and didn't speak to the boys, this caused me to have the only instance of doubt on whether I was trans. I hated that I had no male friends despite being male, but none of the guys wanted to hang out with me, and nobody ever chose me for their teams in PE, despite me being good at sports and playing as aggressively as the boys. I therefore had a moment of doubt if I was actually meant to be a boy. I don't want to get religious here, since I am a spiritual person who follows Taoist philosophy, not the religion. But back in the day, as a little kid who didn't know any better, I merely believed there was a benevolent God that lived in the sky. I didn't know anything beyond that, as I never went to church, thankfully. Anyhow, I decided that God would tell me if I was meant to be trans. I therefore asked God for 3 signs within 1 week if I was meant to be a boy. I had to put a time frame on my request in order to know if I got these 3 signs or not, after all. And funnily enough, I got all 3. The first sign was the transgender person being on the news again. The second sign was my mom specifically talking about this transgender person on a different day out of nowhere, and my mom had never suspected that I was trans, assuming I was in the tomboy phase, and despite that phase being my entire life. The third sign was my friend calling me Sam instead of my dead name, also out of nowhere since they never called me that before, and I don't think they call me that again in the future. Once I had my 3 signs from God that I was meant to be trans, I never doubted myself again. Anyhow, it wouldn't have mattered in the long run if God told me I was trans or not, as I would still be trans regardless due to my dysphoria. Again, being trans is a core part of who I am, just as I have a passion for writing and can't live without doing it. It was definitely challenging to make it through middle school, between the bullies and puberty and daily panic attacks. Yes, I had daily panic attacks, and that made me miss a lot of school. I thought my stomach was hurting, or I was having mini heart attacks. I had no idea I was suffering from crippling anxiety, and it was all thanks to the bullies. Now, there's one instance with the bullies that I must mention. It made me very, very angry and ashamed, and I still feel upset by it. No matter how humiliating the story is, it's a crucial point to bring up. I attended the after-school Boys and Girls Club program, like most of my bullies. During classes, during the day, the bullies hardly ever came after me because there were teachers around. However, when we were all outside in the after-school program with only a few young adults barely keeping an eye on us, the bullies would come after me. They would literally chase me and yell insults. I pursued them too because I wasn't one to sit by and be bullied. Yet I also never got into actual fistfights since I didn't want to get in trouble. Chasing one another around seemed to be the compromise. Anyhow, on this particular day, they had initiated the usual pursuit. I was really worn out after running for almost a whole hour. my chest aching for air. Remember that I'm only one person. They have multiple people who can just chase me at random points whenever they want, so I was exhausted way quicker than any of them. I collapsed to the ground, struggling to breathe, my anxiety starting to take over. All of the bullies surrounded me in a circle, making fun of me as I lay helpless on the grass and unable to react. One of the girls announced to everyone that there was blood on my pants, and I had started the period. This was very humiliating for many reasons, but especially with being trans. I checked when I got home, and there was no blood. I hadn't started anything, just a period of rage. Thankfully, this did not happen again. I was able to go to my home or a friend's home after school when starting 8th grade. Middle school wasn't entirely horrible, at least. In PE, we had to have our hair cut short if we didn't want to tie it up, and since I refused to tie mine up, I was finally able to get my hair cut short, at least to my chin. It wasn't as short or boyish as I wanted, but it was a start. I also got to wear more baggy sports clothes instead of the feminine stick-to-your-body clothes. This was more thanks to my autism and sensory issues with clothes. Like, I still can't touch jeans to this day. Ugh. Whenever going to the beach, I was allowed to wear a giant shirt over my bathing suit so I could hide my body. Now, that's a whole other topic to get into. Sexualization. It is very repulsive to me how females are always sexualized, no matter the society or culture. While I can go off on this, I will just say that, in regard to my own transition, this is another big reason I did not want to be seen as female. And I never wanted anyone to see my body in this way or sexualize me, female or not. The heavy sexualization of females in media also makes me wonder if that's why I'd never connect to female characters growing up. I would relate to the tomboys for a bit, but then they'd be sexualized or become a generic female stereotype, and I'd instantly become disgusted with them. It was the same thing when a character suddenly got a love interest. I'd lose the connection to them. I always just connected to the single male characters. Let's go on a little side rant here. My anxiety is the type where I can't eat anything if I feel too anxious. I'll feel like I'll have to throw up despite this never happening before. This was why I would go home early from school, or even feel the need to flee from restaurants when we would go out to eat as a family. There were times where I'd be panicking so hardcore that I'd have to force feed myself tiny bits of bread because I'd be so anxious that I'd end up in a hospital for not eating. Now, I was clearly underweight, thin, and small. I couldn't eat due to anxiety from both the bullies and food, but I also just wouldn't eat from the fear of getting a large chest if I ate too much. This was one of my greatest fears growing up. And not just for dysphoric reasons, though that was pretty fair too, but also because I did not want to be sexualized, like all of those female characters. I therefore refused to eat at times, even when I wasn't anxious, in order to keep my weight low. To this day, I still don't know what I would have done if I had a larger chest. I was very lucky to be small-chested that I could pass without a binder. I really wish I had support from the local LGBT community while navigating middle school. I do feel things could have been better for me if I'd had that early exposure, but I didn't even know what LGBTQ+ meant until I was out of high school, and so I struggled silently.